I'm reading today from Answer to Job by C.G. Jung. This is the 2010 50th anniversary edition with a new foreword by Sono Shamdasani, editor of the Red Book. Answer to Job appears in volume 11 of the collected works of C.G. Jung. And in those volumes, each paragraph was numbered. Because Answer to Job falls in the middle of volume 11, it begins with paragraph 553 and ends with paragraph 758. In this video, I'm going to read from Dr. Jung's original preface, which he named Lectori Benevolo, and he referred to a specific biblical text. I am distressed for thee, my brother, from 2 Samuel 1:26. Paragraph 553. On account of its somewhat unusual content, my little book requires a short preface. I beg you, dear reader, not to overlook it, for in what follows I speak of the venerable objects of religious belief. Whoever talks of such matters inevitably runs the risk of being torn to pieces by the two parties who are in mortal conflict about those very things. This conflict is due to the strange supposition that a thing is true only if it presents itself as a physical fact. Thus, some people believe it to be physically true that Christ was born as the son of a virgin, while others deny this as a physical impossibility. Everyone can see that there is no logical solution to this conflict, and that one would do better not to get involved in such sterile disputes. Both are right and both are wrong. Yet they could easily reach agreement if only they dropped the word physical. Physical is not the only criterion of truth. There are also psychic truths which can neither be explained nor proved nor contested in any physical way. If, for instance, a general belief existed that the river Rhine had at one time flowed backwards from its mouth to its source, then this belief would in itself be a fact, even though such an assertion, physically understood, would be deemed utterly incredible. Beliefs of this kind are psychic facts which cannot be contested and need no proof. So in this paragraph 553, Dr. Jung has introduced one of the most fundamental ideas of Answer to Job, which is the idea that there are both physical and psychic facts. This becomes much more important later in the book, but he's pointing out that psychic facts don't need to be physical to be true. Paragraph 554. Religious statements are of this type. They refer without exception to things that cannot be established as physical facts. If they did not do this, they would inevitably fall into the category of the natural sciences. Taken as referring to anything physical, they make no sense whatever, and science would dismiss them as not experienceable. They would be mere miracles, which are sufficiently exposed to doubt as it is. And yet they could not demonstrate the reality of the spirit or meaning that underlies them, because meaning is something that always demonstrates itself and is experienced on its own merits. The spirit and meaning of Christ are present and perceptible to us even without the aid of miracles. Miracles appeal only to the understanding of those who cannot perceive the meaning. They are mere substitutes for the not understood reality of the Spirit. This is not to say that the living presence of the Spirit is not occasionally accompanied by marvelous physical happenings. I only wish to emphasize that these happenings can neither replace nor bring about an understanding of the Spirit, which is the one essential thing. In this paragraph, Dr. Jung has introduced the idea of meaning as critical for the human psyche. Paragraph 555. The fact that religious statements frequently conflict with the observed physical phenomena proves that, in contrast to physical perception, the spirit is autonomous, and that psychic experience is to a certain extent independent of physical data. The psyche is an autonomous factor, and religious statements are psychic confessions, which in the last resort are based on the unconscious, i.e., on transcendental processes. These processes are not acceptable to physical perception, but demonstrate their existence through the confessions of the psyche. The resultant statements are filtered through the medium of human consciousness. That is to say, they are given visible forms, which in their turn are subject to manifold influences from within and without. That is why whenever we speak of religious contents, we move in a world of images that point to something ineffable. We do not know how clear or unclear these images, metaphors, and concepts are in respect to their transcendental object. If, for instance, we say God, we give expression to an image or verbal concept which has undergone many changes in the course of time. We are, however, unable to say with any degree of certainty, unless it be by faith, whether these changes affect only the images and concepts or the unspeakable itself. After all, we can imagine God as an eternally flowing current of vital energy that endlessly changes shape just as easily as we can imagine him as an eternally unmoved, unchangeable essence. Our reason is sure only of one thing, that it manipulates images and ideas which are dependent on human imagination and its temporal and local conditions, and which have therefore changed innumerable times in the course of their long history. There is no doubt that there is something behind these images that transcends consciousness and operates in such a way that the statements do not vary limitlessly and chaotically, but clearly all relate to a few basic principles or archetypes. These, like the psyche itself or like matter, are unknowable as such. All we can do is construct models of them, which we know to be inadequate, a fact which is confirmed again and again by religious statements. So basically what Dr. Jung is saying in this paragraph 555 is that all religions are models trying to describe what's going on in the unconscious. Paragraph 556. If, therefore, in what follows I concern myself with these metaphysical objects, I am quite conscious that I am moving in a world of images, and that none of my reflections touches the essence of the unknowable. I am also too well aware of how limited our own powers of conception, to say nothing of the feebleness and poverty of language, to imagine that my remarks mean anything more in principle than what a primitive man means when he conceives of his God as a hare or snake. But although our whole world of religious ideas consists of anthropomorphic images that would never stand up to rational criticism, we should never forget that they are based on numinous archetypes, i.e., on an emotional foundation which is unassailable by reason. We are dealing with psychic facts which logic can overlook but not eliminate. In this connection, Tertullian has already appealed quite rightly to the testimony of the soul. He says, quote, "These testimonies of the soul are as simple as they are true, as obvious as they are simple, as common as they are obvious, as natural as they are common, as divine as they are natural. I think that they cannot appear to anyone to be trifling and ridiculous if he considers the majesty of nature, whence the authority of the soul is derived. What you allow to the mistress, you will assign to the disciple. Nature is the mistress, the soul is the disciple. What one has taught or the other has learned has been delivered to them by God, who is, in truth, the master even of the mistress herself. What notion the soul is able to conceive of her first teacher is in your power to judge from that soul which is in you. Feel that which causes you to feel. Think upon that which is in forebodings you prophet, in omens you augur, in the events which befall you, your foreseer. Strange if, being given by God, she knows how to act the diviner for men. Equally strange if she knows him by whom she has been given. Paragraph 557. I would go a step further and say that the statements made in the Holy Scriptures are also utterances of the soul, even at the risk of being suspected of psychologism. The statements of the conscious mind may easily be snares and illusions, lies or arbitrary opinions, but this is certainly not true of the statements of the soul. To begin with, they always go over our heads because they point to realities that transcend consciousness. These entia are the archetypes of the collective unconscious, and they precipitate complexes of ideas in the form of mythological motifs. Ideas of this kind are never invented, but enter the field of inner perception as finished products, for instance, in dreams. They are spontaneous phenomena, which are not subject to our will, and we are therefore justified in ascribing to them a certain autonomy. They are to be regarded not only as objects, but as subjects with laws of their own. From the point of view of consciousness, we can, of course, describe them as objects, and even explain them up to a point, in the same measure as we can describe and explain a living human being. But then we have to disregard their autonomy. If that is considered, we are compelled to treat them as subjects. In other words, we have to submit that they possess spontaneity and purposiveness, or a kind of consciousness and free will. We observe their behavior and consider their statements. This dual standpoint, which we are forced to adopt towards every relatively independent organism, naturally has a dual result. On the one hand, it tells me what I do to the object, and on the other hand, what it does possibly to me. It is obvious that this unavoidable dualism will create a certain amount of confusion in the minds of my readers, particularly as in what follows we shall have to do with the archetype of deity.